Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another fireside chat with the Serverless Guru team. It is I, Josh Proto, head of marketing, and I have, again, our founder and CEO, Ryan Jones, and a very special, amazing guest, one of our amazing developers here at Serverless Guru, Jan Stone. So thank you so much for joining us today, Jan.
Absolutely.
And today, Jan is going to talk with us a little bit about, what it's like to be a serverless developer. So a continuation of our last talk of talking about what is the state of serverless, what sort of preparation, education sort of goes into becoming a serverless developer. And so you've got the job. This is what you can look forward to. Jan is going to be giving you some insights, as well as I have some questions on asking him about what his experience was studying for exams and how he got here. Jan, I think, one of the big questions people like to ask is, what is serverless development? How would you describe it? What it means to be serverless?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is how incredibly empowering it feels to understand all these serverless technologies. Because just learning front end and back end, I always was like, okay, and now where does that run? Like, how does that get to an audience? But when you understand S3 static site hosting, Lambdas, S3 storage, and the hundreds of other services, it's like, wow, I can build anything.
So as a serverless developer, you don't necessarily work with just one sort of technology stack or one sort of service, correct?
Exactly. It's a new one every day, because there's one of the things AWS prides themselves in above other cloud providers is they have like something for everybody, the exact right tool for the exact right application. Like they're coming out with a new type of database practically every couple months. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
Sure. Do you have an example of something on the tip of your tongue, just like sort of like the perfect, like an example of that solution to a particular problem that is serverless?
Well, something that just came up a couple days ago was Cognito. There are so many ways to implement authentication and login, and we've used Firebase Auth, we've used Cognito, and one of our clients wanted a really quick solution that looked really standard and comparable to other websites. And so for that, there was Cognito Hosted UI.
Okay.
So that was, it just takes you to a page on Amazon where it has the standard UI that you see on a lot of websites.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it has all the input verifications, like telling you, okay, your password length is correct, does all that for you. So it makes the development time be like an hour and no maintenance beyond that.
That's nice. Why serverless development? There's hundreds, if not thousands, of programming languages. There's, as you mentioned before, there's tons of front-end work you can be doing, back-end work. How that all mixes together. What was so appealing that made you want to, jump into this cloudy world of serverless?
Yeah, well, it allows me to do all of that. It allows me to jump around with front-end, back-end, and all those supporting services. And plus, it's the future. Because I think the future developer will know how to do all those things.
Yeah.
The future developer, because in the future, you're not going to have people managing servers.
Yeah.
And because that part is made easier, you're just going to be focusing on what does your application do. And when you're able to focus on that, then you can have one person involved in all those pieces.
I know I wanted to ask about how is being a serverless developer similar to maybe being a different kind of developer, but it seems like as a serverless developer, you're not just a generalist, but you're really you also have a depth of knowledge of how all these systems work and come together. Is that also correct to categorize it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Depth also helps. I mean, it comes up for sure in the certifications. Even at the associate level, they expect quite a level of depth in networking for the traditional, how to hook up security groups, how to specify source IP addresses, and it turns out that stuff is still pretty useful for a bunch of our clients. even if you have a serverless RDS database, it's good to know how to lock down the security groups so that you can only SSH into it from a particular IP address. So you can list like 3 IP addresses. The 3 developers who are working on that team are the only people in the world who could possibly make an SSH connection into that serverless RDS database. So that's an example where some deep networking can even be useful in a serverless context.
Wow, nice. And that's something that they cover in the exams you're sort of tested on. The exams. Okay.
Yeah, and then for the pro level certifications, I'm preparing for the Solutions Architect Pro. They get really deep into that networking stuff, and I find that every time I spend 10 minutes learning for that stuff, all of a sudden I think, oh, I can use that for a client project, or I can use that because it's all useful.
Wow, very great. And these exams, are these the ones mostly offered by the AWS, these AWS certifications? Okay.
Yeah, I'm going for the AWS certifications. I looked a bit into the Google Cloud, and it's interesting to see all the parallels and how they have stronger differentiation between this is a regional service, this is a global service. That was something that popped out to me when I just started looking at that comparison. But for now, AWS is giving me everything I need.
That's great. That's very good. Brian, did you have anything that you
wanted to so thinking back to what you're talking about when it comes to serverless developers and kind of learning serverless, usually we talk about like API gateway, Lambda, those type of things. But what you were just describing is networking, which is typically more the traditional background outside of the serverless, where you're not having to even manage these things because serverless fully managed go like hand in hand. So like what other things have you seen from your experience that kind of experience would be good to have prior to making that transition to serverless development?
Well, there are a lot of other examples where connecting a serverless to the networking is really useful. I see a lot of people, they like to stick with their old database system and then connect a Lambda into it. As far as like what preparation going into serverless, I think a lot of the basic database stuff stays the same. Like it's good to know SQL, both for serverless or not serverless. It's good to it's good to understand like how the global architecture of AWS works, both server and serverless, because you can do some optimizations based on geography, even with serverless. Even though serverless, the whole thing is that it manages a lot of it for you. You can probably do some like geographic tweaking. For example, one thing I saw Slack give a talk about is HTTPS termination with CloudFront. CloudFront is used both with serverless and non-serverless architectures for CDN, content delivery network. And the interesting thing is because AWS has their own backbone network, there we go, network combined with serverless. As soon as the request reaches that backbone network, that SSL handshake that has to happen to create the SSL connection can happen at the edge instead of traversing the entire global network. So it can reduce the latency for that initial connection down by like a whole second or something.
Wow, that's amazing. So did you have a lot of network experience going into the first exam, or did you sort of have to pick up the speed? Because I know like probably a lot of people when they're looking at the exams, like we recommend 1 year of experience, we recommend 5 years of experience for this. And everyone I think overestimate their own abilities and be like, oh, I don't really need that much. But surely it would help. And I want to hear a little bit about you. Like, did you have all this background before jumping into how hard was it for you to sort of like pick up to get to the standard?
Yeah, I failed the developer associate 2 times before I got it, and because I did overestimate. I think doing the cloud practitioner exam gave me a bit of a false sense of confidence, because I spent like 1 or 2 weeks preparing for that full time. Like 40 hours a week for 1 more week or 2 weeks, and passed it. But then as soon as you go to the developer associate, that was the post 2019 change, which made it the hardest associate developer associate exam, and that was full of so much stuff. So I feel like I crammed like 3 years of studying to pass that exam. And it helped to first take the solutions architect associate, then the sysops, and then the developer, because that's currently the order of difficulty. And then I also watched a bunch of YouTube in addition to the traditional classes, because sometimes like they throw out these traditional like IT terms, and I don't come from an IT background, and so sometimes I'm like, what is RAID database splitting up, and it's helpful to watch a YouTube or 10 YouTube videos that talks about the same thing too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I took a similar path. Obviously, as you said, they changed it quite a bit. So I was actually going around giving a talk on certifications and which ones you should start with. And for a while I was saying, start with the developer one, but then they switched it and made that the hardest one. At first, I actually had 3 or 4 friends that I told them to take the Cloud Guru course, watch the full thing of it, go through the test or whatever, and if you make more than like 80%, you're just gonna pass it automatically. And like 4 people did it and they all passed it automatically. When I got mine, it was actually at that level. Since they've redone it and made it more difficult, it's been a lot more tricky, as you experienced. But I also did a similar thing where reading FAQ pages, watching YouTube videos, taking the Cloud Guru course, and then trying to like actually like apply it and like make it real. Were all different things that were helpful to me to prepare a little bit. But then there's also something that you mentioned right at the beginning of like how much preparation and things like that going into a certification. And one thing that you get, and I'm definitely a person that does this, is I use my experience of watching YouTube as the only measurement for how to prepare. So I'll say, oh yeah, I've watched 5 hours of video or 20 hours of video. So then you can do this too. And then you're ready to go. But actually the part which is like behind the scenes is, are you actually working in this space currently? Because if you are, it puts you so far like ahead in this whole thing, because everything that you do for your normal job, if you're working with AWS, is already preparing you for those exams. Like a big thing that, Jan touched on is like networking, the terminology that they use. Like really traditional stuff, or even like deep dive into networking terms that like, I wouldn't personally use if I was just building a REST API. So definitely keep a grain of salt when you hear people telling you their experience online about how quick you could get it. Jan is a good example of starting from like 0, and then I think you said like, I think you said that you brushed your teeth and like listened to AWS classes and stuff. So
yeah, I've even taken a couple showers with AWS podcasts playing when I really was like coming up on test deadlines. There's so much pure audio content, so that lets you like do your chores, wash the dishes while playing those podcasts. And sometimes I thought like, what am I doing? Is just playing in the background? Like how is this actually going into my brain? Like how's it soaking in? But there were a few questions on the exam where like I had a flashback to me washing the dishes, and like, oh yeah, I learned this exact thing while I was washing the dishes and was able to answer it.
Right. Then it worked.
It worked. Yeah. And those podcasts can also be helpful because sometimes they're told in the context of stories and like special guests from companies and how they apply these things in the real world, and probably that's how it stuck, despite me doing other things at the same time.
Exactly. And let's see. So we've talked a lot about certifications and that process. And so for you, or was sort of how was getting the certifications, the process of learning the certifications, how essential was that for you to be the level of developer you are right now? Because I think a lot of people have a question where it's like, oh, well, do I really need the certification to become a serverless developer? And I didn't just want to quite ask that, because like obviously it's like yes and no. But I want to hear from you, like how has this served you sort of in larger context of your career?
Yeah, I've heard people say like certifications are mostly just for establishing credibility with less technical people who aren't able to evaluate you on other criteria. But I've found personally them to be incredibly useful for my day-to-day.
Yeah.
It's pretty much all been really applicable. I mean, we're probably lucky at Serverless Guru to have a wide range of clients, so we are able to apply a wide range of things, and because of that, it's all been really useful.
Good.
And probably also, it's been helpful to learn these things while having those clients already, because I'm like in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, how can I help them?
Yeah.
And I know their problems, and when I see a service, like, oh, that could help them. So it makes me more awake and alive as I study these things.
Good. So there's definitely like a good positive feedback loop between each one, sort of giving energy to the other. It's very, very nice. So, so you talked about how, working at Serverless Guru, and that's where you're doing the bulk of your cloud development as an engineer. And just wanted to talk to you a little bit about like, what is it like working, like do you primarily work in a team? Like what does your workflow look like? Like, I think one thing I wanted to have you talk about was like, what does the day in the life of Serverless look like? And then you can also throw in some things that maybe like aren't the day in the life. What are some of the things that pop up and you get to do that you enjoy or have some context on?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is that at Serverless Guru, we have a very good understanding amongst each other. Yeah. So there's like we get each other. So we don't have to have really long meetings convincing each other of stuff. And so a day in the life might be I'll spend 15 minutes in the morning just throwing up on Slack what I think I'll be working on that day. And then I'll probably call throughout the day. I might have quick calls with other people just to ask like what they're working on and if there's anything that I can help with. And that's just a quick part of the day. And then from those calls, I might hear like, oh, you're facing that problem. I just recently solved a similar problem and maybe this would help. So some sort of quick brainstorming. And then in terms of working on client projects, I might have a call with the client like once or twice a week to see what they currently care most about and what I also might suggest they care more about. Like, have you thought about these security things? And then actually doing development work. We have a growing team, so I try to pass off as much development as possible so that I share the fun. But if there are like some things that I know I can really knock out because I've done that particular AWS training, for example, then I'll just spend a few hours and do that part. And then writing articles and studying. That's one thing I love about Serverless Guru is that we have time to continue training constantly and write about it. and writing about it helps me learn it better too. And then it's exciting because it turns out not that many people write about these things, especially because it's sometimes cutting edge stuff, like some of these services just came out. And then the articles will get a like from the people at Amazon who wrote these services, and that's always really exciting.
Yeah, that's always fun. Another question I wanted to ask you was, what's your experience being like a contractor? And like compare that to the sort of experience you've had like being an employee, and just sort of the things that like people who are coming into the serverless world, like what can they expect from either of those two situations?
Well, yeah, that's a question I've gotten when I've done some interviews. That's a day in the life thing I didn't mention because that doesn't happen like every day. It's more like, but I think freedom is the word that comes to mind. Because you know, with a contractor, I think the emphasis is on completing projects and not like showing up 9 to 5. So you know, as long as I'm completing projects, it's all good. So I have flexibility as to my schedule, as to where I work, and I also it's just freedom, I think, in many ways. And then from a tax perspective, I think it depends on a person by person basis. You know, you want to do your research. I chose to take the route of asking an expert. I talked to a CPA a block away from here in downtown Portland, and he told me with my current situation, working as a contractor is likely going to get me better tax benefits. Sure. Than if I were full time. So hey, that's good.
Yeah, that's great. And a consultant expert know that about your tax situation. Yeah. I don't claim anything on this cast that you're hearing today is legal financial advice.
Disclaimer, we are not tax experts. But I feel like the bit of money I spent consulting a CPA is going to more than pay back in terms of like tax benefits that I found out about.
You had to only give like one agreement advice to that person. Who would it be? Not who would it be? What would it be?
Just get 1 or 2 AWS certifications. Just do it because you're gonna learn so much. And as soon as I started, I had a couple posted. Like I got so much more attention from recruiters on LinkedIn. Like it just shot up. Like how many people were contacting me, and they were saying like, yeah, it's rare to see someone with a certificate. So if you get those certificates, and they're not as expensive as people think. Like I recently talked to someone and they said, yeah, I'm not sure if I'll get that yet. They're like a few $1,000s, right? No, the cloud practitioner one I think might only be 100, and then the associate one's like 150. So I think it's very worth it.
Yeah, they're not like a professional like cybersecurity exam, which is like thousands of dollars in some levels. So it's like reasonable, fairly reasonable.
And you can get your training from whichever source you want. Could be free training. So
yeah. My opinion on this would be certifications definitely. To me, sometimes like, because I communicate with a lot of people about like this subject, and the one thing that I just want to like shake them and say like, just do something, you know, like just make one step, you know, like it could be a certification, it could be pressing play on a YouTube video, and it's so hard to start. And so if you just start at all, you're going to be miles ahead of anybody else. And also, I feel like, you know, as with every new trend that comes out, you know, serverless is a trend that we're currently going through. There's this level, like this perception that, oh, I've missed the train, right? Like the train has already left the station, I'm too late, right? And what I want to say is you're not too late. You're actually like 5 years ahead. So literally if you press play on a video and watch it right now and do that once a week, you're still going to be way ahead. So if you do something similar like what Jan did, or he just went down the rabbit hole for like 3, 4, 5 months straight, brushing his teeth, watching it, 3 years ahead in a few months, in a technology which most companies still haven't even moved into. They're still 5 years away from even implementing this on a larger scale, because even though there's those flashy numbers of like serverless can save you 70% or something, there's not people to do the job, right? So how is a company that's, let's just use an example, let's say WeWork, right? Let's say WeWork had millions of dollars in servers, right? And they wanted to then cut their costs by 70 to 90%. They have to hire experts to do that. And right now, there's not very many people that can. So if you can learn serverless even a tiny bit and understand what the terminology is, understand how to read the documentation, things that you can get from certifications, because it's very challenging. And the other thing to touch on that too, a certification is like, it's a hard line in the sand, right? It's a goal that you can go after. You know the steps in place that you have to do to get there. And there's also a result, right? You can see that you passed it. And a lot of times that's really hard to measure. So, if you're going after being a serverless developer, I would say personally, learn the skills which are relevant to the job postings that you're reading. So, if they're saying Lambda, API Gateway, DynamoDB, all these like AWS services, go straight after, what you want, right? I feel like too often people try to like climb up the ladder instead of just like skipping to the front, and you can skip to the front. The serverless completely changed how everything was done. And now we're in a state where fully managed services allow you to completely cut away a lot of operations, a lot of server management, a lot of scaling issues, performance issues, cost issues. So if you no longer have to worry about that, that's people's entire jobs, just doing those factors. And if you can just jump to understanding how the result works now, that's what people are switching to. That's what people are moving to. So everybody else right now, even if they're senior developers with 10 years of experience, they're going to be trying to learn the stuff that you're learning right now from ground zero. And you actually have the advantage, in my opinion, because you're elastic, right? You're able to basically see things from fresh eyes, fresh perspective, and then go after it. All that coming back to make one step in any direction, and you're probably going to be going the correct way.
Fantastic. I think that's both great advice, guys. And thank you so much for taking the time today and listening to us chat about sort of the inside scoop on what it means to be a serverless developer. Thank you, Jan, for your time today and your insight, and thanks, Ryan, for hopping on and getting to join and contribute as well. And so Serverless Guru signing off, and we'll see you next time.
See ya. Thanks, guys.